Rural Americans deserve access to the best of what our nation has to offer, especially health care. Across every state and every community, America's rural hospitals are the first line of defense, protecting our families, neighbors, and loved ones. No matter where you live, hospital care doesn't clock out. They're there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Each year, America's over 5,000 hospitals care for millions of patients, providing 24/7 emergency care, delivering babies, cancer treatments, and other life-saving care that patients rely on. Behind every one of those patients are doctors, nurses, and caregivers working tirelessly to keep people healthy and safe. Hospitals are our community's lifelines. They employ our neighbors and keep our families healthy. But now, some in Congress are threatening access to care. Tell Congress, protect patient care to keep America strong. Don't cut rural health care.
Listen, all you New Yorkers. Taxi! Okay, we're looking around.
This is the 77 WABC minicast.
Welcome back. Joining me now is Dinesh D'Souza. Dinesh D'Souza is one of the most influential and prominent writers, scholars, thinkers, public intellectuals, an award-winning author, filmmaker, host of a new weekly show, Dinesh. He's also, I think, proudly the father-in-law of Texas Congressman Brandon Gill. His daughter Danielle D'Souza Gill, a lovely young lady, is married to this future president. So, Dinesh, welcome to the Roger Stone Show.
Roger, it's always a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
I've been watching you talking online, and you are as shocked as many, perhaps not me so much, but by the revelations regarding Steve Bannon. Now, my problem with Steve Bannon, I've been very, very clear, began when he testified under oath before the House Intelligence Committee, as I did, and correctly said that neither he nor I had ever discussed WikiLeaks, Julian Assange, or the emails the Democrats claimed had been stolen. Then, to my shock, who shows up as a surprise witness at my trial in New York, dressed kind of like a fat Johnny Cash, all in black with a lot of dandruff, but shows up as a mother witness and says the direct opposite, essentially perjuring himself on the stand. Even George Washington University law professor Jonathan Turley noted the inconsistencies, telling the New York Post that Bannon, had two diametrically opposed sworn statements. So I then saw him go to Jeffrey Epstein's home, as reported in the New York Post in 2018, and I knew there was bad news afoot. What do you make of all these revelations now from these DOJ emails and photos, Dinesh?
Well, Roger, I'll start by saying that I think in some ways we're in a little bit of a similar position, because ordinarily we would see something in the news, we would see something in the public domain, and we'd be trying to make sense of it. But in this case, both you and I, in very different ways, have had some direct experience, with the subject, in this case, Steve Bannon. In my case, it goes back really about 12 years. I was just moving into the domain of documentary filmmaking. And of course, I was new. I didn't know the ropes. Somebody said, you should talk to this guy, Steve Bannon. And so I sat down with Bannon, who was sort of reputed to be a filmmaker. And basically, Bannon offered me the following deal. He said, okay, Dinesh, here's how it goes. You need to raise the money, $2.5 million. You need to go to Hawaii and Indonesia and Kenya, which is where I plan to go, following the Obama trail. You need to get the Obama story. You need to make the film about Obama. And then you need to sign over the rights to me. And I was like, I go, how does that work? He goes, well, we'll kind of pay you for your work in making the film, but essentially I will then own the film. And so think about this, Roger, as I look back on this now, we're talking about a film that took in something like $40 million. And essentially Bannon's simple proposition was to sort of steal the film out from under me, and in return for nothing. Because
look, this is the same Steve Bannon who pled guilty to defrauding donors of the Build the Wall nonprofit out of $15 million. It had nothing whatsoever to do with Trump. His two co-conspirators served long prison sentence. The president pardoned Bannon, but then when he was re-indicted in New York State on the exact same charge, in the same court which had treated Trump so badly, Bannon pled guilty to the embezzlement, to the fraud, $15 million, but was given no jail time. Then Bannon would turn around and be named as an unindicted co-conspirator in the $1 billion fraud trial of his, I would call, shady Chinese patron, who was convicted of various financial crimes, but Steve himself, again, not prosecuted. Now there seem to be legitimate questions about a lawsuit pertaining to Bannon's management of a Bitcoin company. But it's the emails that I find shocking. Here's a man who goes on the air on the War Room, a show title he stole from Owen Schroyer and me over InfoWars, where he continues to support President Trump, yet he's calling Trump stupid, calls for Trump's removal under the 25th Amendment, brags about undermining Trump's China trade policy, and says that he, not Trump, but he, Bannon, is the center of the MAGA movement. This is outrageous. I mean, first of all, you see him also coaching Epstein about a film that they are supposedly making, where he says he's going to bury the pedophile narrative. Now he wants us to believe that he was just cozying up to this monster, when it's very clear that his coaching of him is to rehabilitate him after he had already been convicted of a sex crime in Florida.
I mean, this is so bizarre and sinister and interesting, I think, Roger, because let's start with the fact that in public, as you said, Bannon is pro-Trump, right? In fact, Bannon wants Trump to run even for a third term. So it would sound like Bannon is Trump's biggest supporter. But then when you read the private communications with Epstein, the opposite picture emerges, that Bannon even has resentment toward Trump, because he thinks that he, Steve Bannon, is MAGA. Not Trump, but Bannon. He says this explicitly. And Bannon also is not above conspiring to want Trump to be ejected from office under the 25th Amendment. I mean, it's just outrageous stuff. And now Bannon is trying to cover all that up by saying, I'm doing research. I had to ingratiate myself with Epstein because I wanted to get the scoop to make a really powerful, critical documentary, except that when you read these communications and they go on and on and on, they're not research. In fact, it's quite clear that it's essentially, I kind of put this in a somewhat salty way, I go, it's a little bit of you scratch my groin and I'll scratch your groin. In other words, both Epstein and Bannon are getting something out of each other, and they're working together to sort of boost each other. So Epstein is telling Bannon, hey, Bannon, listen, you don't want to be like a political hack, so you need to go into media. That's a kind of a better front for you. You can continue your activities under the sort of banner of I'm a journalist. And sure enough, soon after that, Bannon surfaces in War Room. And conversely, you have Bannon advising Epstein, basically telling Epstein, this is a way in which you can, by and large, burnish or polish up your image. And so this has nothing to do with research, and people who fall for that, I think, are showing a level of gullibility. I mean, I realize that with so many of these guys, it is a little hard to believe that they are so different in reality from the public image they project. But that's what the facts clearly show, and they show it very vividly and gruesomely in this case.
Yeah, I find it interesting. Bannon started attacking Elon Musk when Musk began calling for full disclosure regarding Jeffrey Epstein. Bannon claimed that Elon was not a legitimate U.S. citizen. That's nonsense. And then demanded that Musk be stripped of all of his federal government contracts for SpaceX and Starlink. Elon Musk, in my opinion, has probably done more for the First Amendment free speech in this country than anyone other than the founding fathers. But Bannon relentlessly attacks a man who spent millions of his own money to help Donald Trump score the greatest single comeback in American history, because he saw when he he purchased Twitter, he saw the files that showed government manipulation of free speech, the cancellation and the censorship of people like you and I, Dinesh. But the supporters of Steve Bannon say, well, he went to prison for 3 years because of his support for Trump. But the truth is, when you get a congressional subpoena, he could have simply fulfilled his legal obligation by showing up for the hearings and asserting his Fifth Amendment rights for the January 6th committee. That's what I did. That's what General Flynn did. Not because I had anything to hide, not because I particularly knew anything, but because I have extensive experience with the Democrats' ability to take honest testimony and twist it into a process crime. But for some reason, Bannon decided to be a martyr. I can't believe that he had lawyering that bad. You can't thumb your nose at a House subpoena, and he should have known better. Instead, he uses it to validate himself. But look, we now know from email today that not only did he want to make Mike Pompeo president, the ultimate globalist, a man who was informed of the Russian collusion hoax and could have warned Donald Trump, as the declassified documents put forward valiantly by Tulsi Gabbard prove, but did not do so. So this idea of Steve Bannon as the ultimate Trump loyalist is an absurdity. And then we've only released 2 hours of 15 hours of video. I'd like to see the rest of that video, wouldn't you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, let me comment on a couple of things that you said, because I think it's possible that, strange though this seems, that Bannon had a certain type of incarceration envy. And by that I mean Bannon realized that the way to really boost his reputation in the MAGA crowd is to sort of get himself locked up. I mean, this would explain why. I mean, maybe his lawyer told him, hey, listen, all you have to do is go in there and plead the Fifth, and this way you'll be fine. But Bannon instead is like, no, I'm not going to do that. I want them to come get me. I want them to lock me up. This, I think, would make sense of Bannon's behavior in that strange situation. The Elon Musk thing, to me, is also interesting because, again, Bannon gave the idea that his opposition to Elon Musk is because, he's a sweaty working class guy standing with, the plumbers and the carpenters and the dock workers against the kind of high-tech, effete elite coming out of San Francisco. So Bannon made it sound like an ideological posture. But what you're saying, Roger, is that no, the real reason for his hostility to Musk is that Musk was actually familiar with the content of the Epstein files and recognized that Bannon is like, he's one of the most dominant figures in those files.
No, he two interesting things. One, thanks to Mario Nawfal, who first online influencer and voice, who noticed this, but very clearly Epstein himself books Steve Bannon a flight to the U.S. Virgin Islands and notes in an email to his staff that Steve is staying with me. We still don't know whether Bannon was in fact on the island himself. The New York Post places him in Epstein's apartment. They had breakfast at least 18 times, according to these emails. And in the emails, Bannon refers to him as a god, also refers to him as brother. Epstein offers Bannon the use of his palatial home in Palm Beach or his Tony St. James Island, suggesting that Bannon might want to take a lady friend there. And Bannon says, thank you, brother. Who calls a convicted sex criminal brother? I think the whole thing has to do with money. I think that as they talk about it, he talks about how the format for whatever filming they're doing together. But I think this was really about money. We know that Epstein tried to contact Bannon when he was working in the Trump White House. Bannon did not respond to him. He only showed up at the largest residential home in Manhattan where Epstein lived in 2018 after he had already been dismissed. I think there's a lot more to this story because it's the next phase of Steve's career in which he is financed by a Chinese national named Miles Guo, who was later convicted in a $1 billion fraud schemes. Bannon is an unindicted co-conspirator in that matter, but was not charged with any crimes. Yet Guo Quo refused 55 times he asserted his Fifth Amendment when asked if his money came from the CCP and about the role of a mysterious William G., who was a Communist Party functionary who was involved with both Quo and Bannon. That story's still developing. So he kind of moved on to his next gig, but now Steve thinks that he will be a viable candidate for president when he doesn't want to answer questions about this Epstein stuff, and when his, I think, paid influencers are out there saying, oh, it was all about the film. That just doesn't cut it for me.
Well, I think if Bannon runs for president, we would have to see it as a money-making scheme and not any sort of genuine campaign. One interesting, for me, window into the whole situation, there's no indication to me that Bannon is any kind of a sort of sexual pervert. There's nothing about girls or underage girls in the correspondence, at least that I have seen. And yet here's Bannon hanging out with not only Epstein, but evidently Epstein's buddy, Woody Allen. And then, of course, my mind flashes back a couple of decades where Woody Allen begins this tempestuous affair, with Mia Farrow's daughter, and the whole thing is extremely sordid. And so Bannon is clearly knowledgeable about the depth of perversion of this world that he's moving in, and yet he moves in it not only effortlessly, but as you say, he seems to admire these figures and hold them up to be some kind of exemplar.
All right, we're going to take a break there. We'll be back with Dinesh D'Souza. Just a minute. Dinesh, when Steve Bannon showed up as a surprise witness in my Washington, D.C. trial against me, the prosecutors had a legal obligation to inform my defense attorneys that Bannon himself was under investigation for defrauding donors to the Build the Wall Foundation out of $15 million. Of course, they never did that. That's why I don't find his proposal to you that you raise the money, you put your blood, sweat, toil, and creativity into a documentary that you would then turn over and let him have for nothing so that he could market it and make millions of dollars is really surprisingly not surprising.
Well, yeah, I think he's obviously a wheeler dealer, and the people who have dealt with him know that. But the Epstein thing is at a whole different level, right? Because ambition, wheeling, dealing, even a certain degree of immorality, you've been around long enough in Washington to know that's a very common commodity. I think what we are owed here from Bannon, and this is really going to be the test for him, is some kind of an honest public accounting. Now, he hasn't done anything like this yet. He's essentially gone into a sort of hiding. He's put out this statement that he's doing research. So he's in a major kind of cover-up and denial mode, hoping it'll go away mode. But I think that what he really needs to do is a kind of honest examination of conscience and an honest kind of public acknowledgement of where he went wrong, what he was trying to do. I don't know if we're going to get that from him. I suspect we are not. But don't you think, Roger, that's what he needs to do?
I think it exempts him for any leadership in this movement. Not only is he not the centerpiece of the movement as he sees himself, but I don't think he's influential. I remember when he scheduled a series of nationwide rallies before the 2022 elections with himself as the major speaker, and literally, as reported in the media at the time, nobody showed up. So I think he's a legend in his own mind. He says he understands he won't win the nomination, but he wants to have an impact on the process. I think he's exempted for leadership. Someone who is helping rehabilitate a sexual pedophile who was very clearly coaching him on that. Someone who denigrates the President of the United States as stupid, advocates his removal under the 25th Amendment, brags about working against his its Chinese trade policy, and someone who I think gets money from admittedly questionable sources to pay this little army of influencers, his posse, that either today are silent in the face of these emails or are attacking those who are asking legitimate questions. So at the end of the day, I think he has exempted himself. God, in my case, the Bible tells me to forgive, and I have done that. As difficult as that is, because this was an unnecessary act of treachery, but that doesn't mean forget, and I haven't forgotten what he did. Only the New York Post reported it at the time, but all the way back in 2018, I went on InfoWars. I am happy to say my name is in the Epstein files. Specifically, Epstein complained to Bannon about an interview I gave on InfoWars, where I correctly connected Jeffrey Epstein to the Clintons as the early financier of the Clinton Foundation and the Clinton Global Initiative, and the fact that Bill had been on the island, I believe, at least 7 times, and been on the plane 27 times. The 7 I base on the sworn testimony of 3 of the Epstein victims. Be sure to check our guest's new show. It is simply called Dinesh, his new weekly show. You can see it on virtually every platform. Dinesh D'Souza, thanks for joining us today in the Roger Stone Show.
Roger, it's always a pleasure.
Rural Americans deserve access to the best our nation has to offer, especially when it comes to health care. Across every state and every community, America's rural hospitals are the first line of defense, protecting our families, neighbors, and loved ones. No matter where you live, hospital care doesn't clock out. They're there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Each year, America's over 5,000 hospitals care for millions of patients, providing 24/7 emergency care, delivering babies, cancer treatments, and other life-saving care that patients rely on. Behind every one of those patients are doctors, nurses, and caregivers working tirelessly to keep people healthy and safe. Hospitals are our community's lifelines. They employ our neighbors and keep our families' health. But now, some in Congress are threatening access to care. Tell Congress, protect patient care to keep America strong. Don't cut rural health care.